Hello, Gothamites. This is Discourse Miniatures with a new video out for you today about the Batman Miniatures game. In today's video, I'm going to be reviewing the Joker Crew objective deck. And I had originally intended this to be part of the Spotlight on Gotham series, where I've been reviewing each faction, each crew, going through their miniatures and discussing their playstyles. But unfortunately, I have been ill this week, so I haven't been able to record a Spotlight on Gotham or a battle report, unfortunately. So I figured that rather than just sort of let the week go to waste, I would instead do a more sort of informal review of the Joker deck. I kind of have a lot of opinions on the Joker deck, so I figured I'd just do it off the cuff, see how it looked in the end. And really, the intention for this is it's a video aimed at not only sort of players who have a bit of an idea of what the cards look like and already know what they're doing. It's aimed as well at sort of beginners, people who maybe don't even really know how the objective deck works or even how the sort of Batman Miniatures game plays at this stage with the objective decks. So I will be kind of running over some of that more foundational stuff about the anatomy of a card and how a card looks. So there will be timestamps in the description if you want to just skip past that and go straight into the sort of Joker crew analysis. But sometimes it's nice to have a bit of a refresher as to how these things work, because I know that whenever I first started, the decks themselves were a little bit unintuitive, but really they're quite simple once they're sort of explained. Okay. So we're going to explore the decks as a whole, as well as then go into the Joker deck specifically and talk about maybe the philosophy behind the deck, how the cards work, what cards are you should bring, and what cards maybe you should leave at home. Because ultimately the decks are they're so important to the crews. So if you're completely new to the game, you should know that every faction in the Batman Miniatures game has a deck of cards. Well, not every faction does yet, but they're coming out, right? So the Penguin doesn't currently have a crew deck, but there's one that will be out for them soon, as of April 2021, that is. They should have one out hopefully by May or June. Um, and how the decks function are, they are basically the means by which you win a match of Batman Miniatures game. So whenever you are assembling your crew, you've purchased your miniatures, you've got your miniatures together, you've got your crew together. The next thing to do will be to assemble your deck of cards and bring them with you as well. A deck size is 20. Um, so you bring 20 cards with you, and these can be made up from really two main sources. First of all, your crew, for example, the Joker here has certain cards that he can bring specifically. So if you're playing a Joker crew, you can specifically bring from that bundle of cards. Then there's also the generic deck as well. These are sort of generic cards that are available to all factions and all crews, and you can bring from those as well. Maybe if you think you've got a weakness, you want to bring some generic cards that are maybe a little bit more mundane, but come with their own downsides. So that's kind of how it functions. And these cards themselves, they have objectives on them. So they have goals on them that you will need to achieve in order to score the points that they are worth. And how the game works is at the very end, you and your opponent, you both basically count up how many cards you scored, and whoever scored the most cards wins. It's really simple. Um, so it's probably very different from a lot of other skirmish games, which tend to have maybe set sort of scenarios in a rule book, like Necromunda, I'm thinking of here, or even the second edition of Batman game, where there's a list of scenarios and missions in a rule book, and you roll on a table, you see which one it is, you set out the map, and then you've got to either control certain points on the map, or grab things, or drag them off, to the deployment zone, or kill enemy models. It's really not the case here, which is super unique because what it means is that my models have been able to basically bundle a lot of theme into these cards. So whenever you're looking at the miniatures that you're going to be bringing and you're deciding which crew you're going to play, are you going to play Joker, you're going to play Riddler, you're going to play Batman, the miniatures are only half the flavor and sort of theme of your crew. The other half is going to be your deck of cards, and it means that every crew plays a sort of an asymmetrical game. You're all trying to score different objectives. If you're playing Bane, you're trying to do something completely different than if you were playing as Joker, which and then you're trying to do something completely different from what you would be doing as Riddler, which is great. It makes for a very interesting game. So that's sort of how that's what the crew, that's what the objective decks for each crew is trying to do. Um, and it really does. I mean, I can't emphasize enough that it really does govern the play style that is available to a crew. So I thought, first of all, what we would do is we would go into the anatomy of a card. We'd look at one of the cards. I would sort of basically go over the very foundational basics of it. Just so whenever I then come to actually review the cards, we'll have a sort of a nice grounded idea of what a card looks like and what it does. So I've chosen probably one of the simplest cards in the entire game. This is the card Dirty Job, and you can see it's sideways here. So Dirty Job. This is a generic card. This is generic. Anybody can take this. Any crew can take this card into their deck. And again, remember the deck is it's 20 cards that you're bringing with you. And the first thing to note is up at the top left, there is a number in yellow. For Dirty Job, it's 1. What is that this is the amount of victory points that it's worth. So if you manage to achieve the objectives as set out on Dirty Job, you score 1 point. Great, simple. Um, Below that is another number, a smaller number in white. That is the number 3. And it's bundled within like a little tiny card. What this is if you wish to take the card Dirty Job, you have to take 3 copies of it. So if you've got a deck of 20 cards and you decide you're going to take the Dirty Job sort of cards, then you have to take all 3 of them, which means now you have 17 cards you've got to take. So there's a lot of cards that have, 1, 2, or 3 copies. So far, that's the maximum 3 copies. And it basically means that you're gonna have to take up certain amounts of slots. There's other cards that there's only 1 copy of the card in your deck, and this is non-optional, right? If you take Dirty Job, you have to take all 3 copies of it. Okay, and then the next part is the text box on it. So there's a couple aspects of this. At the very simplest, the text in yellow is what you would need to score in order for this to be an objective. In order to score this as an objective. So for Dirty Job, it is make an enemy model KO or a casualty. It's super easy. Basically, kill an enemy model or knock them out. That is a really easy objective. You'll probably be doing this, typically anyway. This is going to be part of your sort of part and parcel of your just standard game plan, which is to disrupt your opponent's plans. You're going to knock them out. You're going to try and make them, you're going to try and kill them, prevent them from scoring their cards. Dirty Job is a really easy card to sort of score because you'll tend to do it. Most crews will tend to do it in course of their normal action. Um, there are a couple of little icons here. Okay. First one is this little icon here. Now, this icon here, it's of a little gun. This isn't super important unless you're playing with what's known as plot cards. Now, plot cards are an optional sort of rule. They add a layer of complication to the game. I'm not really going to go into them here because I think that they are very optional. I don't think that I think that most people don't really play with them, but it's just an option, something to bear in mind. Every card has a category. There is a menace. This is a violence category, which, obviously with the little gun, right, makes sense. But there is protection and there's control as well. Right now, just all you need to worry about is that it's the categorization. That doesn't really have a lot of gameplay impact unless you're playing with plot cards. Um, Next up is the number. And you can see here it's the number 3. What that determines is when can you score this card. There are 4 phases to every round. Again, no real need to go into it in depth, but basically, the first phase of every round is initiative. It's called Take the Lead. Basically, you roll initiative. That's phase 1. Phase 2 is where you assign what are known as audacity markers. They're basically markers that will allow a model to take more than one action in the upcoming phase 3. So I'm not really going to go into that right now, but that's basically that's phase 2, and then there's phase 3, which is really the bulk of the game, which is called execute the plan. That is essentially where most cards are going to be scored in phase three. So expect to see this number often. That's essentially when you're deciding which model you're going to move, and you move them, or you shoot at people, or you put down suspect markers. That's where you do the bulk of the action in the game. And then there's phase four, which is known as the recount phase. This is where you sort of, you roll to see if people recover, you roll to see if people who are poisoned take damage, you clean up just the game space, get everything set up for the next round. So that's just the recount phase. There's a fair amount of cards to score on phase four as well. And then finally, you can see there's a little star. That's after the three. That basically, so there's three different icons. These basically determine how it's scored. So there's the little star, which is instant, which basically means that as soon as this happens, make an enemy model KO or casualty, you can just play this down on the board and say, bam, I score a dirty job. Well, hey, so that's probably, instant's probably one of the more often seen sort of one. Although I suppose they're all there's other types as well. There's like a little clock. Basically, I'll point these out as we go through them, but there's a little clock that is essentially it will score at the end of the phase, and then there's another one which is a diamond, which is basically it will score after a certain condition is met. So I will explain these; they will make a lot more sense in context. So don't worry about them right now. Um, Now, there's more text, right? It's not just the yellow box. There is more text, and that is this text in white. Um, and this says a friendly model adds one die to a melee attack. That model suffers one blood. So what this is this is the resource component of a card. And what I mean by that is that every card can be played in one of two ways. It can be played as we've been talking about it as an objective, make an enemy model KO or a casualty, and then you play it, you score it for 1 point, you get that added into your pile of scored cards. Or you can decide to play it as a resource. There's no conditions on this. Just basically you spend a resource point. You can see here there's the number one. It's beside a little lightning bolt. That is the resources that it costs to play it as a resource card. Everyone starts with three resources, and that's refreshed each round. So you go back up to three. Now, some models give you more resources, and then some models remove resources from your enemy. Right, so you might have two resources because your opponent's playing a card or a model rather that has the searcher trait, which removes a resource from your opponent. So that's just something to bear in mind. Basically, what resources do is they will usually give you some form of advantage. They will, think of this as like your box of tricks. You can just simply play this card as a resource, and it goes into your discard. You basically it goes into your spent resources pile, and then like it's put back into your deck at the end of the round. So it'll go back in. In this case, Dirty Job has a friendly model as one die to a melee attack. That model suffers one blood. What that means is simply I'm going to attack somebody with a melee attack, and I decide I'm going to play Dirty Job as a resource. I spend a resource point. I say I'm playing Dirty Job as a resource. I put the card down, and I will add a die to my melee attack. So, and then I will, mark off a blood damage on my model. It's as simple as that, basically. That Dirty Job will then go into the spent resources pile, ready to be, bundled back into my deck at the end of the round, and then I might be able to draw it later on. So that's all that means. One important thing to note is that you can only ever play one card per model's activation. Rather, you can only ever play one objective card per model's activation and one resource card. So I could play Dirty Job when I knock someone out, and then, I could play a different card as a resource during that same activation. So it's just something to bear in mind. So there's two components to every card, and I'll be reviewing them on both bases. Um, There's some cards that have a really poor objective, but have a really good resource on them. So that's just something to bear in mind. Okay, so that's what a card is, right? So now you sort of know, what we're kind of looking at when we're looking at the cards. Now, specifically here, we're going to go into the Joker deck. And one of the things to note about the Joker deck is that it was one of the first decks that were available for the Batman Miniatures game. It came out in sort of 2019, late 2019, early, January 2020. It came out in the starter set, the Back to Gotham starter set, and it came out alongside the Batman deck. And both the Joker and the Batman cards were the sort of first ever available, and they came out alongside the generic deck as well. So they are, compared to some of the later crews, they are relatively simple and pretty intuitive, both the Batman and the Joker deck. The cards that the Joker has access to are not too complicated. You'll see that some of them have a lot of text, but it's really a lot of text saying very little, right? It's just trying to be clear about what it's intended to do. Most of the Joker cards are pretty intuitive. They employ very simple mechanics, and they employ a similar theme of mechanics as well. There's a lot of variance in some of the cards, a lot of random chance in some of the cards, right? As befitting the Joker. It's very much an element of the Joker is that there's a lot of random rolls, okay, in the deck as well. There's also a theme of discarding of cards as well. A lot of cards, whenever scored in the Joker deck, will ask you then, will tell basically both players to discard a card at random. And that that's in on the one hand pretty bad because obviously you have to discard a card as well. You're going to be hit by that, but it's pretty good because a lot of the Joker cards don't need much setup at all. They can basically, just be played from the hand pretty easily. Um, whereas some other crews, they need a lot of setup. And I'm thinking of crews like Two Face, where you kind of want to cultivate a certain board state. You want to be placing down suspect markers. You want to be gardening essentially the field with suspect markers to then play cards that you have in your hand. If as a Joker player, I make you discard some of those cards in your hand that you were really intending on scoring, that's great for me as a Joker player because now you have to completely reassess what your game plan is. And that's excellent. So that's a big mechanic. It does hurt the Joker sometimes, but it's all in the game basically. As a Joker player, you just kind of have to you have to accept that there is a little bit of random chance in the card. I don't think the deck as a whole is hurt by it. Um, Another thing to note about the Joker deck is that it has a low score ceiling. And what I mean by that is, whenever I was talking about the cards previously, and I was looking at Dirty Job, I was saying about how this is a one pointer. Scores 1 point. That's very low. That's the lowest that a card can score for. You can get cards that score for 2, and you can get cards that score for 3. 3 obviously being the best. Um, The Joker deck comes with a lot of 2 point scorers. In fact, they're all 2 point scorers except for one card, which is a 1 point scorer. That is not the same for other crew decks. I'm thinking the Batman deck, for example, has quite a few 3 point scorers. So, all things being equal, if you score all of your cards and Batman scores all of his cards, the Batman player is going to win. So, you need to, as a Joker player, think about how you're going to be disrupting your opponent's plans, how you're going to prevent them from scoring other cards. Now, I think that when Night Model were designing the Joker deck, the Joker cards come with some additional advantages that maybe the Batman deck doesn't come with. To give you just a very quick and easy example, there is a Batman card called Get Them Off the Streets. And this basically means that to score this, you get 3 points for scoring it, and you have to arrest a model. That's it. That's something that the Batman deck, like the Batman crew will want to do. They want to arrest criminals, and you get 3 points for doing that. The Joker deck is different. It will do things like blow up suspect markers, dealing damage to people around it. It will apply poison to people, right? You get these like little additional benefits, but as a result of that, it doesn't score as highly as some of the Batman cards. And I think that that was sort of Night Model's philosophy when designing it, was that you would get these additional upsides that the Batman deck wouldn't get, but you just wouldn't be able to score as many points. Now, overall, the low score ceiling isn't a huge deal for the Joker. It's not a big problem because really, most games you're not going to score most of your cards, or well, all of your cards, I should say. Some games you'll score a lot of cards, but you're never really going to score all of your cards. It's very rare that you get through the entirety of your deck. So if you can just consistently score all of your cards, which is very possible with Joker, or consistently score most of your cards, which is very possible with Joker, I should say, um, you'll be in a really good place. Most crews will find it hard to keep up with you. It's just that bear in mind that you will be limited in the maximum amount of points that you'll be able to score. Um, Another thing that is kind of unique to Joker and the Batman crew, so they were both the starter crews, and they come with less cards than other factions and than other crews do. So your deck size is 20 cards, okay? For if you're playing Bane, for example, or you're playing League of Assassins, then whenever you got to the League of Assassin deck and the Bane cards, they have enough cards that would make a full 20 deck, a 20 card deck. Batman and Joker don't. If they were to take all of the cards that are available to them in their that are crew specific to them, they would only be able to bring 17 cards, which means that they will need to take some generic cards with them to complement their deck. So, as part of this video, I'm going to review the generic deck cards as well. This isn't too bad. There's actually some really good cards for the Joker in the generic deck, which can't be said for every crew. Not every crew likes to dip into the generic deck, but it's actually fine for Joker. So Joker doesn't really get hurt by this too much. Okay, so without further ado, then I think we'll go into the Joker deck and we will look at them specifically. So the first card that we're going to look at is the Showtime card. Now, this is a good opportunity to talk about another element of the decks. So, a lot of characters in the game come with character specific cards. And the ones that we'll be looking at as part of the Joker Crew deck review is the Joker card and the Harley Quinn card. Not every character in the game comes with these, but just certain characters do. Um, and what these are these are character specific. So this is Showtime. This is the Joker card. And you need to bring Joker with you in order to bring this card into your deck. This is like, think of this as like a special additional card that is opened up for bringing a certain model. And importantly, because this is a character card, it doesn't count towards your deck total. It doesn't count towards your 20 card deck size. This is just purely in addition. So this is just gravy, basically. You don't have to bring this either. If you're bringing the Joker model, you don't have to bring the card with him either. But it's just pure upside, as far as I'm concerned. Especially because this Joker card will score you 3 points. So I'd said earlier that there are no 3 point scorers in the Joker deck. That is strictly true to the crew, but the Joker character comes with this specific card that you can put in your deck. Okay, so that scores 3. And you'll note there that there's only the one of those, right? Just the one. So we're going to look at the actual objective of this now. Now, there's a lot of text on this. In reality, though, it's very intuitive. It's very simple. So it's played in phase 1. That's basically when you're rolling initiative. You'll slap this card down and you'll say, I'm playing Showtime. Um, and then there's the little diamond there, and that means that it's scored when the conditions of the objective card are met. And that will make more sense when I go into the actual objective card itself. So, how this functions is it says here, place this card near the character card of the active model. This isn't quite right because obviously you're playing this during the initiative phase, so there is no active model right now because you're just rolling for initiative, right? So, what the common wisdom is, and how everybody plays it, is that essentially you just choose one of your models. So you can choose the Joker if you want, but you pick one of your models, okay? And you just say that's the model I'm choosing. Then you roll 1d3 plus 2. So say you roll a one, right? So you roll a one, and then you add two to that, so you've got three, and that is the number of enemy suspect markers within 18 inches that you must remove and place in contact with the active model that you chose earlier. Um, so basically, you pull in, 1d3 plus two suspect marker enemy suspect markers into base contact with your model. So if you choose the Joker, you just suck in those cards and you pop them down right beside the Joker miniature. And then you put a number counter, which reflects the number that you had rolled plus the two previously. So say it was three, and you pop that down. And then essentially, after each subsequent model's activation, you reduce the value of the number counter by one. And then whenever the number counter is reduced to zero, if your active model, the model that you had chosen previously, is still in base contact with those suspect markers, you score the card. So long story short, basically, phase one, you're rolling for initiative. You roll 1d3 plus 2. You suck in that many suspect markers. You pop down a die beside it. And every single time a model activates after that, you put that marker down by one. And then whenever it hits zero, you score. So long as you're still in base contact with those suspect markers with the model that you've chosen. So it's quite simple. It's probably one of the wordier Joker cards, and probably one of the more complicated ones as well. But it's not too hard to get a sort of once you kind of get it, you get it right. This is an excellent card. So this is a really really good card. Not for it scores you three. So in terms of an objective, we'll go into the resource in a moment. But in terms of the objective itself, it scores you three, which is just excellent for the Joker, just because most of his cards are already two, right? So getting an extra three is great. Um, it's played in phase one. So your opponent will know that it's coming, and they will be able to play around it to an extent. Now, the trick for this card is basically you play it during phase one, and then just don't activate your model until the number counter has been reduced to zero. Um, because then that means that if anything were to happen, for example, if your character was to be goaded and move away from the suspect markers, involuntarily, you'll be able then to activate your model and move them back. So you play this card. What will happen is your opponent really has two answers open to them, right? The only way they can really stop you from scoring this card. The first one is probably the easier one. It's to kill whatever model you choose, right? Because if your model is dead, they're not in base contact with those suspect markers, and you will not be able to score this card whenever the number counter hits zero. The other way is to remove the suspect markers, which means that they'll have to move into base contact or within 3 inches if they have the detective trait of the suspect markers and reveal their own suspect markers. This is the worst of the two options for them because that's a lot of actions to prevent you from scoring three points. That's like having to unless they have a really efficient way of doing that, they're gonna have a really hard time. It's not a great option. More often than not, they'll if that's their only option, they're probably just going to ignore the card and let you score it. So um, so they'll really want to kill your model, basically. Which means that, as much as I'd said earlier, you can choose any active model. You tend to want to choose the Joker because the Joker, um, you want to pull in these suspect markers to him because he tends to be like one of the tankiest of the bottles available, to your crew. Now, if you've brought someone like Clayface, who's like very, very tanky, maybe they're a better shout, right? But most lists will probably have just the Joker and Harley Quinn. So you'll probably want to pull in Joker. Um, he also tends to be pretty central when you're positioning your crew, right? You're going to have him right in the middle of all your henchmen because he has a big inspire bubble around them, and you want all your henchmen to be throwing out suspect markers all over the place. So he's probably in a position to be supported by other henchmen if an enemy model does move into melee to try and disrupt the Joker in any way. So, yeah, very good card. Very easy to score if played well. Obviously, just don't activate the model until you've scored the card itself, because you can be punished by special actions like goad from your opponent. Um, so That's the objective aspect of the card. It's really good objective. But this is one of those cards where the resource is really good as well. So you will have to. I think there is a time when you want to play it as a resource rather than just as an objective. Um, so the resource, it costs you one resource point, and basically for each friendly suspect marker within 20 inches of the Joker model, you roll a d6, and then you assign a number counter um, for each d6. So you're rolling one die basically for every single suspect marker, and you're assigning a number to each of the suspect markers depending on what you rolled for that suspect marker. And then when any roll after that is made, you must exchange one of the dice results with the value of one of those number counters. So, to cut a long story short, you're basically rolling a bunch of dice, and then those will be the results for rolls until they're out. Um, a really important part about the wording on this is that when any roll is performed, you must exchange one of the dice results. So if you roll nothing but sixes, say you've got four friendly suspect markers around the Joker, and you roll nothing but sixes, and your opponent is rolling a die, you have to exchange, their one that they have just rolled for one of those sixes. So there can be a little bit of this is a good, there's good sides and bad sides to this, right? Um, Now, it's more good than bad because you get to decide what die gets exchanged with what number. So if you roll a one, you choose the six. There's a six, a four, and a one from your suspect markers. You choose the six. You've just upgraded your one to a six. If your opponent then rolls a six, you change that for the one, right? So you have some element of control over this. So this is a really, really good card, especially for one resource. Now, obviously, the downside of it is you're playing this as a resource. Whenever a card gets played as a resource, it goes into the spent resources pile. And then during the recount phase, at the end of each round, the spent resources pile is shuffled back into your deck. So you're taking a little bit of a risk. If this card isn't one of the ones, if Showtime isn't one of the cards in your hand at rounds one or two, if you get this in round three, you're probably not going to want to play it as a resource because the likelihood of you bumping into the card again to be able to score those 3 points is pretty unlikely unless you're doing a lot of cycling, unless you're pulling through your deck very fast. So um, but if you get it in phases one, or yeah, rather, if you get it in rounds one or two, you might want to think about simply playing this as a resource. It's a very, very strong resource. Um, so for this card, you'll always want to bring this card with you. Every single deck that has the Joker in it, if you're bringing the Joker model, you'll bring this card because this card is just excellent. It's just very, very easy to score. It's an easy 3 points. Okay, and then next we're going to look at the Harley Quinn special card. This is a bit different, unfortunately. I really like Harley Quinn, but her card isn't as strong as the Joker card. So this one is called Jokerometer. As you can see, it's Harley Quinn. It's the sidekick version of Harley Quinn, which is really important because there's quite a lot of Harley Quinns out there. This is the sidekick specific one. So this is a three scorer as well. So that's excellent, right? That's great. And for that reason alone, I think that you're probably going to want to bring this card in every single list that you can bring. You can bring anyway if you bring the sidekick version of Harley Quinn. And this is this is played as an objective in Phase 3 as well. And again, it has a little diamond. It's basically when the condition of the card is met, you score it. So what it reads is you basically place this card near the character card of the active model, and when another model within 4 inches of the model you just chose rolls two natural results of one in any roll, then you move the active model you chose into base contact with the model that rolled the two ones, and then you perform a melee attack. And if you damage the enemy model that had rolled the ones, then you score the card. So basically, how this is intended to work is right? If we imagine that we're playing it on Harley Quinn, because really this is intended to be played on Harley Quinn, right? And the way that Harley Quinn plays, Harley Quinn is a very fast model, and she tends to get into the thick of things very, very early on in the game. Um, and she has the capacity to get right into the thick of things. So you activate Harley Quinn, you play this card, right? You pop it down, and you move her right into the middle of the enemy, and you make an attack at somebody. Cool. Then the enemy activates a model, and say they shoot at Harley Quinn or they try to punch Harley Quinn, and they roll two ones. Well, now she gets to teleport into base contact with them and perform an melee attack against them. And then if she hits them, she scores the points, right? And sort of the thing about this is that it's really intended for Harley Quinn because she is so fast and she does tend to get right into the middle of the enemy crew. So if the enemy crew are really bundled up, they're bunkered up together, the likelihood of someone rolling two natural results of one within 4 inches of her go up pretty drastically, right? Now, one thing to note is that it doesn't have to be an enemy model within 4 inches that rolls two natural results of one. And you still must be placed in context. So this can hurt you a little bit. Although to score 3 points is good. This is a really hard card to score because Harley Quinn will typically go down before you see two natural results of one. Really, anybody who's in a position to try and scope out two natural results of one in any role um, will tend to go down before they get a chance to score this card. So that's that's why this card is a lot harder to score than the Showtime card. Now, alternatively, the resource point of this, so you can instead play this card as a resource for two resource points, which is quite expensive for a Joker card. Joker cards tend to be cheaper. It's quite expensive, but it does have a model with the alias Harley Quinn gains +1 extra strength die until the end of the round. That is excellent. So the psychic version of Harley Quinn is already rolling. She has the devastating trait, which allows her to roll two strength die. This will give her an extra strength die, which is really, really excellent. I think she hits on a 4+. So this is another 4+ roll that will allow her to get off another two stun damage. That's really good. To be honest, I tend to use it more so as a resource card. Now, one of the downsides is if you don't have Joker or meter in your opening hand, Harley Quinn, really, it might be just my playstyle, but I find that she tends to go down before round three. So it's kind of hard to get this off as a resource. And a downside is that it's specific to Harley Quinn. So as soon as she is knocked out or made a casualty, you can no longer play this as a resource. You're just gonna have to throw it down on a model and hope that one of your allies doesn't roll two natural results of one. So yeah, it's kind of rough, but it's not the worst card in the world. It's pretty good if you can score it right. It's 3 points that the Joker otherwise wouldn't get. So I mean, if I'm bringing Harley Quinn, I'd still tend to bring that card. I would bring that with me always. Now we have Bite the Dust. So this is a card that has a lot of text, but it's really, really, really simple. This is phase three, and it scores um, when the condition of the card is met. Essentially, what you're doing is you're placing down a suspect marker. You change that suspect marker to what's known as an explosive teeth marker. Really, it's still just a suspect marker, but now you roll a d6, um, and that number that you roll, say you get a 4, you're now going to count down at the end of every subsequent activation. And whenever that number goes 4, 3, 2, and then it hits 1, and then it goes to 0, the teeth are going to explode. And if you hit anybody, you deal 1 blood damage to them, and then you score the card. And then both players discard a card from their hand at random. Pretty simple. Now, the thing that kind of makes this a little bit unique is that those teeth, the suspect marker itself, it doesn't stay stationary. At the end of each subsequent model's activation, it will move 1d6 inches towards the activated model. So if you imagine, they're basically Joker teeth that are moving about the map, and as soon as they, count down to 0, they explode and deal damage. So it's a nice little AOE. Um, it basically has an opportunity to deal a little bit of damage to the opponent or to yourself. And can score you some points. It's a very easy card to score. It might appear to be difficult to score, and I think that there's a little thing like there's an element of playing as Joker that you need to get into your head. Um, that will really help you score a lot more cards. And that is that it is okay to hurt your own models to score your cards. Okay, this is like once I had realized this, it was like the skies had opened, right? Um, it is really that Bite the Dust is one of the two cards I think that you should always try and mulligan your opening hand for to try and pick up. So if you draw your opening hand of cards, your four cards, and you don't have a Bite the Dust, or there's another card that we'll get into in a moment. But if you don't have Bite the Dust in your hand, you should go looking for it immediately because there's three of these in your deck and they score 2 points and they're really easy to score in rounds 1 and 2. Because all you need to do is move forward, place down a suspect marker with Bite the Dust, roll the dice, and then move your guys around so that it'll blow up one of your guys, right? All it does is deal a single blood damage. That's fine. I mean, if you're playing as Joker, you have lots of disposable henchmen anyway, so who cares if they take one blood damage? And then you score the card. Easy 2 points. Easy 2 points. I will take four blood damage. I will have four random henchmen take damage from this so I can score the points guaranteed and be happy with that. That's really, to be honest, that is one of the main important things. The game is too short. The game is too short to worry about a single blood damage. There's only 4 rounds in this game, which means that you need to maximize the points that you're scoring every single activation. That means that Bite the Dust, just let it blow up and be happy about that. I have had competitive games there where I have blown up 4 or 5 of my own henchmen with this card that I've gone on to win the game because if you do that, enough, you're going to score more points than your opponent. Yeah, okay. Maybe one of your henchmen will go down a round sooner than they should have. Maybe they accumulate too much damage, but it's really not, in the grand scheme of things, it's not really a big deal. As an added sort of upside or downside, depending on how you look at this, whenever this card scores, both players discard a card from their hand at random. Um, really, it just that is what it is. That doesn't really hurt the Joker more than anybody else. So it just you have to accept that the discard mechanic is going to exist and it's going to be in your deck, and it is. Now, an upside is, and this is the first of many. The resource component of this card costs 0. The Joker has quite a lot low resource cards, and we're going to talk about this a little bit now, but you'll notice it as it goes forward. A low resource point is really good because what that means is, I had said earlier, whenever you spend a card as a resource, it goes into the spent resources pile. And then in phase 4 of the recon phase, it basically gets shuffled back into your deck. Now, how the hand of cards works is you always have 4 cards in hand. So if I play a card as a resource or I play a card as an objective, I'm immediately drawing another card. I will always have 4 cards in my hand. So you can cycle through your deck really, really fast in this game if you have low resource cost cards. You can basically just play a card as a resource, get it out of your hand. If you don't think you can score a card, you can just play it as a resource, get it out of your hand, draw another card. And then the card will go back into your deck anyway, so you'll score it. You can score it later. So Bite the Dust is a 0 resource cost, and it says shuffle your spent resource cards into the objective deck. Now, this is one of the weaker 0 cost resource ones, just because it's asking you to do something that might not be possible. Um, as far as I'm aware, you can still play this even if you have no spent resource cards. You know, you can just basically play this as a 0 cost, do nothing. Um, Now, you probably don't want to be honest, because Bite the Dust is really easy to just throw out there and just let it go, right? All you need to do is place a suspect marker. That's a super, super, super easy requirement compared to a lot of other cards. This is like basically breathe air, right? That's the objective. Breathe some oxygen, right? It's very, very easy. So Bite the Dust, excellent card. Bring it always. Never ever leave it out of your deck. Even if you know, look, put it this way: I designed my crew around There's a few other cards as well, but I go for larger crew sizes so that I can guarantee that this will explode on somebody on my crew, and I don't even worry about what the opponent's doing. I bring, I like to bring 11 models, roughly speaking, in a Joker crew. Now that's on the larger side, but I like to bring about that amount of crew members, of lowly henchmen, because I want this card to explode on them, and I want them to take damage because I'm the Joker, and that's just that's just how the Joker rolls, right? So this is an excellent card. I love this card. It's very thematic to the Joker as well. These teeth will be buzzing around all around the map. You'll have a lot of fun with them. Yeah, excellent. And if you're lucky, you might be able to get two of these off in a single round, right? So they're just superb. Okay, and then we come to the second. Um, I will say probably the best card in the Joker deck in terms of scoring it. This is like such a safe card. This is the "It Doesn't Look Fresh" card. This is the second of the two cards that I will always try to mulligan for, right? So if I draw my opening hand and I don't have Bite the Dust and It Doesn't Look Fresh in there, I'm going to go looking for it. But the only caveat being that if I have one version, like one copy of It Doesn't Look Fresh in my hand, I probably won't go specifically looking for it. I won't mulligan for that card again. Um, just because, well, we'll go into it. So it's phase three, and it's because of this reason, right? This scores at the end of phase three. So I'd said previously that you can only score one card per activation, per model activation. But outside of that, you can score as many cards as you want. Um, this means that you can't score the same card at the same time, right? So if I play two, It Doesn't Look Fresh cards. So what that means is when you place a friendly suspect marker, you might change it to a poisoned fish. It's still treated as a suspect marker. And then if a model reveals this marker, they suffer the poison effect. But if better, if it's still in play at the end of the round, you score this card. If I do that once during an activation, I won't be able to score this card again during this round because I can only score one at a time. So you can only have it one. It doesn't look fresh out at a time. Um, so yeah, so that's why I'll tend to just simply want to have one of these in my hand at a time. And it's, to be honest, it's not going to be in my hand for long because I'm going to play this card as soon as possible. This card is basically the requirement of this card is play a suspect marker. Hope it doesn't get revealed. That is such an easy card to score. You really want this card in your hand in the opening game. At the very in round one, and you really want to see more of these drawn after you've scored them. So, um, one thing to bear in mind about It Doesn't Look Fresh is that there is counterplay to it, right? Your opponent can reveal the card, so don't place it near a sewer marker because they will come out of the sewer and then they will um, reveal it. Um, Another thing, if you want to guarantee that this card is scored, you can simply outweight your opponent. And what I mean by that is wait until the very last model you have to activates, and then play this card because it only has to remain in play until the end of the phase, and it's played in phase three. So if your opponent has activated all of their models, well, you cannot help but score this card if you play it, right? Because they will not be able to reveal it. They just don't have any activations left to them to reveal it. Um, this is a very easy card to score. You can literally walk out of your deployment zone, throw this card down, and then just easy 2 points, right? Easy 2 points. The resource cost is a one resource. Um, and it is basically it allows you to swing a poison check. So when a model suffering the poison effect takes this endurance check to resist, you may remove one of the dice after seeing the result. So this sounds okay, right? Like basically, if you have poisoned somebody, you want them to take a blood damage or two blood damage. If they've gotten four poison on them, that sounds fine. But the problem with this is that it's usually scored outside of phase three, right? Whenever you're rolling your endurance check to resist poison, it's during phase four. That's when you take your endurance roll to see whether or not you're going to suffer a damage or not from poison. So this card has to be in your hand at the start of phase four. Um, that means is that you didn't play this card during phase three. So why did that happen, right? And it means that if it's in your hand in phase four, you can play it during the next round. So don't cycle this card, would be my answer. Would be basically what I would say is don't cycle it, hold on to it, play it in the next round. Now, if you're on, you know, if you have three of these in your hand, you probably will be like, right, well, I'll just get rid of one of these. I'll play it as a resource, but that's so unlikely. So I very, very, very rarely see it played as a resource. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen it played as a resource. It's always used, I will greedily hold on to this card to just throw it out during the next round. So this is an exceptional card. This is comparable to Snitch, and it says a lot to how powerful the Snitch card is on the Batman faction, that this is not as good as Snitch. So yeah, excellent card. This is an always card. I don't think there's ever a reason not to bring this. Even in teams that have access to Joker cards, I think we'll want to bring this every single time. Okay, next we have Let Them Do Their Thing, which is the first of sort of the more, I guess, the more difficult cards. Right, so we've seen kind of two of the mainstays. I think that Bite the Dust and It Doesn't Look Fresh are probably cards you're going to bump into a lot. There's three copies of them, and they have a position on the board. Right, they'll leave their mark. Let Them Do Their Thing is a little bit different. This is going to be a harder card to score. So this is played in phase three, and it is a diamond again. So once again, this is sort of once the condition of the card is met, then you may score it. And what it has is reveal a friendly suspect marker, and you center the explosive template on the marker. Then you choose a direction, and you roll 2d6, and it moves that many inches, and then it explodes. So it explodes, and any models that are hit by the explosion suffer 2 stun damage. And then if this inflicts any damage, you score the card. So this is a 2-pointer again. Really, and get used to that, right? That's good. They're all 2-pointers except for one card. And this one is prone to a little bit more variance. This has a little bit more opportunity to whiff, right? Because you 2d6 is there's quite a large gulf of distance there that you have to choose. So you really want to be trying to pick a direction where you really think that it's likely to hit a model, where there's a lot of there's a different clusters of models along the way. Um, so this has the potential to whiff. It can feel sometimes very inopportune. You can just get unlucky, basically sometimes. Now the upside of it is that it deals 2 stun damage, which is significantly better than a single blood. Bite the Dust deals a single blood. That is so forgettable that I literally try to blow it up on my own guys just to guarantee that it blows up. Let Them Do Their Thing. Uh, it's 2 stun damage. I'm a little bit more wary about it with Let Them Do Their Thing, but again, I will still point in a direction towards my own crew if it looks more likely like it's going to go off there. Because, once again, it's the Joker, and the Joker really doesn't care about their henchmen being injured or not. So, yeah, but it's a good card. It will score. It might even do a little bit of damage that you'd really like, and you can get some really big plays. You have to reveal a friendly suspect marker. So it's not as easy to throw out there the way that Bite the Dust is. Bite the Dust, you can just move forward and throw it out. Let them do their thing. The board has to be developed to some extent. You already need to have a suspect marker out. So there's going to be a few more activations, to set up this card, which means that really it's going to be a lot harder to score on rounds one. But by two, three, and four, it should be easy enough. There should be plenty of your suspect markers flying around. So that's pretty good. The resource cost on this card is really, really interesting and really, really messy as well. So you can pay one resource, and basically any model within 4 inches of a model with a poison effect also suffers the poison effect. So if the enemy crew have clustered around, and say you have happened to throw a gas grenade and hit maybe 2 of them, and 1 or 2 of them have moved, around a little bit, you can play this card and suddenly spread poison out. Like I have used this card before to spread poison to 11 models or so, including this is including my own guys. Um This can really get poison out there, get toxin out there. It's a really fun card to play as a resource, so just bear that in mind. You'll probably more often than not try and score it as an objective, but as a resource, it can be a lot of fun, especially if you've brought the poison package. And I'll talk about that. There's some cards specifically that I don't think you'll always bring in a Joker deck that really need you to play into the toxins and poisons aspect of the Joker. Um, this is one of those cards that might be able to help activate that a little bit, right? If you've already brought some models that can play with poisons. So this card is an always card for me. I will always bring this in my Joker deck. Next up, we have Let Them In on the Joke. This is a superb card. Just excellent. So Let Them In on the Joke is probably up there with It Doesn't Look Fresh as one of the easiest cards to score. It scores on phase 3. It's an instant score. And basically, one friendly model with the Trickster trait places a suspect marker within 4 inches of an enemy model. That's all you need to do. That is ridiculously easy. So the main thing to remember about this is that the Joker has a special rule, Chaos Agent, which gives all his henchmen the Trickster's trait. So you basically just need to activate a henchman, move within 4 inches of an enemy model, and play a suspect marker to score this card. This is a superb card. Now, the reason why you really don't want this in your opening hand is because more often than not, you won't be within 4 inches of an enemy model in the first round. So by the second round, third round, you should be able to score this card. No problem whatsoever. When it scores, both players discard a card from their hand at random. Again, just life being the Joker. Um, that's not too bad at all. I mean, that's fine. It's kind of a bummer whenever you have two of these in your hand and you lose the other one because really these are so easy. These are free points basically, right? One of the really important things about terms of priority is that if you can score this card with a henchman, um, you should do so. So rather than make an attack, you should score this card. You should run into melee with an enemy and throw down a suspect marker, scoring this card. The only time where that's probably not the best is if you think you can kill the enemy model. Um, so and it really is about you. This is something you'll need to evaluate in the moment. There's some models out there that are so threatening that you probably want to kill them, but more often than not, you probably just want to throw out the suspect marker and score 2 points, right? Because 2 points is 2 points, and that's how you win the game. It's by scoring the cards. Um, Sometimes I will allow an enemy model. I will cultivate an enemy model. I will let them dance around my own backline so that I can throw out suspect markers beside them, scoring this card. That's how good this card is, right? It's just really easy to score. Just a superb card. It has a really nice resource as well, and it speaks to how good the resource is on this card and to how good the objective is that you actually will have a hard time choosing between these sometimes. The resource of this is reduce or increase the value of a number counter by 1 or 2. That is amazing. So you can play this, as a resource maybe to help get Showtime off. If you recall, that's 1d3 plus 2 you're trying to count down. You could reduce that by 2. So if you're trying to wait 4 activations before being able to score that card, you could play this for one resource and just have to wait 2 activations. Um, you could take a Bite the Dust. You can see that it's beside like 4 enemy models, and you really want to blow it up right now. You can just throw out a reduce that by 2, and it explodes just right there and then. This is a great card. This is an always card for me. The only time where maybe it wouldn't be an always card or be kind of slightly conditional would be if I had a really odd Joker list that consisted of like a lot of free agents, not very many henchmen. Maybe I've brought Harley Quinn as my leader, and I don't have really many henchmen. I've brought like Captain Boomerang. I don't know, something like that. Maybe then I don't bring this, but if you're bringing a henchman, like a more traditional Joker deck with a lot of henchmen, and the Joker is a leader, this card is an auto include. This is a superb card, just excellent. Okay. Oh, and by the way, reduce or increase the value of a number counter. You can increase a number counter of an opponent. So if like your opponent has played something like cyber attack, you can increase the number to give you more time. to try and prevent it from scoring. So just excellent. Okay, and now we have Let's Dance. This again is a 2 pointer. It scores for one copy of it in the deck. Um, this is played in phase one. So, like Showtime, you play this whenever you roll an initiative, you'll throw this down and say, I'm going to play Let's Dance. It has a timer. So, basically, it scores at the end of the round. And this is a friendly model with the leader, psychic, or free agent rank suffers damage from an enemy action during this round. So, I think sort of this is a very simple, intuitive card. It's very easy to get. Essentially, you throw this down, phase one, you know, and you say, "Go on, hit me then," right? Because if you do attack, my Joker model, or if you attack my Harley Quinn, or my Captain Boomerang, I'm going to score 2 points. So in that sense, it's good. It can sort of prohibit your opponent from maybe taking actions that they otherwise would want to, or it can make them think twice about taking a very obvious course of action. If they have the Joker in their sights and they think, I can knock out your boss here, and you throw this card down, they might, like, mistakenly think twice about it. Um, this is a good card in that sense. However, I think that this is one of the cards that I tend to leave out of my list, if only because I like to go very henchman heavy, to the extent where I only have Joker and Harley Quinn in my typical crew. And if I only have Joker and Harley Quinn, it's really hard to score this card. Like, really hard to score this card. Harley Quinn typically goes out rounds 2 or 3 if she's doing well, and then it's just the Joker. In those cases, I really think that if you're not taking any free agents, you're just taking a sidekick and a boss, you're probably better off just leaving this at home. Um, you're kind of reliant on your opponent playing into you in order to score it as well. So it's not something you can just throw out there the way you can with it doesn't look fresh or bite the dust. You can't just proactively throw it out and it will score. This is something that your opponent will have to take an action to allow you to score it. They will have to concede you these points, and they won't always do so. So that's just an element to think about this. So this is a card I would call conditional. I wouldn't bring this always, but if I have a third free agent, if I'm bringing like Deadshot or something, I will bring this card because you just have more opportunity to score it. The resource point of it is it costs one. You can choose one friendly model with one or more damage markers, and basically, you can exchange your stun damage for blood damage, or you can exchange your blood damage for stun damage, and you can't do that if it would knock you out or remove you as a casualty. Really simple. Basically, convert your damage type. This is, in theory, really, really good. It has a lot of utility in theory, but it is very matchup dependent. So, for example, if you're up against Batman, you might want to exchange, a lot of stun markers for blood. Or if you're up against the League of Assassins, you might want to exchange a lot of the blood markers for stun. Um, just because those crews have difficulty dealing the alternative type of damage, right? So Batman deals a lot of stun damage, so you want to have as much blood damage on you as possible. League of Assassins deal a lot of blood damage, so you want to have as much stun damage on you as possible, just to save you. So that's good, but it is very matchup dependent. Most crews deal a mixture, and they find it very easy to deal a mixture, so you might have a harder time sort of getting utility out of it against those other crews. So this card, my evaluation of this is conditional. Bring sometimes. Okay. And now we have seasoning the mix. So seasoning the mix. This is a 2 score, and you bring 2 versions of this, 2 copies of this into your deck. This is a phase 3 card. It is an instant scorer. And you score this by basically making a model with the poison effect dead. You remove them as a casualty. Then both players again discard a card from their hand at random. So this is what I would call basically this forms a part of the poison package for the Joker. So this card is conditional in so much as if you have ways to apply poison easily, then I would bring this card. Applying poison easily, there are only certain models in the game that can do this. So if you don't have someone like Ace of Spades or the Arkham Asylum Joker, you probably won't have a means to apply the poison effect, and therefore you won't be able to score this card very easily, if at all. So this card is not one that you will bring all the time, depending on your list. However, if you do have someone like Ace of Spades who has specifically the Joker, the special action Joker gas, which basically lets out gas within 4 inches around them and poisons everybody around them within 4 inches, this card is a breeze. Like I would definitely bring it then, because you know you can really just focus down those models with poison and kill them. And poison helps you kill them as well, right? Because they're taking damage at the end of every round anyway if they're failing their endurance rules. So this is a very conditional card. Um, if all you have is the Back to Gotham Joker with his poisoned knife, you don't want to bring this card at all. There's another card as part of this package, which is I'm feeling weird. Um, uh, yeah, I'm feeling weird that if I'm bringing the seasoning the mix cards, I'll bring the I'm feeling weird as part of my generic cards as well. So, but I'll talk about that when I talk about I'm feeling weird. In terms of the resource cost, then, um, this is at the start of a model's activation. You get to move up to two friendly suspect markers 4 inches for one resource. That's great. Um, you know, sometimes you want to move friendly suspect markers. That's really has a lot of utility, if only because it'll allow you to place suspect markers down. If you recall, you cannot place a suspect marker within 4 inches of one of your own friendly suspect markers. So sometimes you just want to get those some suspect markers moved that will allow you to place them again, right? For example, if you have let them in on the joke and you would really love to just place that down in front of Batman, but unfortunately there's already one of your suspect markers there in front of Batman, you can just play this as a resource. Pull that card away and then score let them in on the joke. So that's a really good resource. That's a really good resource, but it's not good enough, I don't think, to bring if you don't have an easy way of actually scoring the card itself. It just, yeah, so it's just a very conditional card. A good card if you can bring it. Probably still, even with the poison package, it's still one of the harder cards in the Joker deck to score. But you're rewarded for doing something you would like to do anyway, which is remove a model as a casualty. And typically speaking, being able to kill a model and score off that is usually really good. And when we come to the generic cards, I mean, we've already looked at Dirty Job, right? When we come to the generic cards, you'll see that the typical ones that are sort of rewarding you for doing things that you'd want to do anyway tend to be really low point scorers to the extent where they tend to score 1 point. So you're kind of getting an extra point here for the fact that it has to be a certain type of model, right? One that has a certain effect. So additional card would only bring if I really have access to a lot of poisons, which you don't really get in the Back to Gotham set. But if you've got Ace of Spades, it's good. Next up, we have So Long It's Been a Gas. This is a 2 point scorer. Again, three copies of this in your deck. Um, this is a superb card. There's a lot of text here that it makes it look more complicated than it is. So there's two ways to score this. You'll see a big or there, right? There are two ways to score this. The first one, which is probably it's probably the better one of the two, is an enemy model reveals one of your suspect markers. Then they must choose one of their models, and you place one of their suspect markers in contact with that model, right? So when an enemy model reveals one of your suspect markers, they must choose one of their models, and then you, as the Joker player, place one of their, as say the Batman player, one of their suspect markers in contact with that model, with that Batman model. Or if you, as the Joker player, reveal an enemy suspect marker, you must choose one of your markers, and then you place one of your suspect marker in contact with the model. Okay, so basically either an enemy reveals one of your suspect markers and then they get to place one of their suspect markers in contact with their model, or you reveal one of the enemy suspect markers and then you must choose one of your models and place one of your suspect markers in contact with your friendly model. And the chosen model in both cases suffers the enervating 2 effect. So what that means is that if the enemy suspect marker is placed in contact with the enemy model, then that enemy model suffers enervating 2. Or if the second condition happens, which is you reveal an enemy suspect marker and you place a friendly suspect marker in contact with your friendly model, then they suffer an intervening too. So I see essentially whoever gets the suspect marker, the extra suspect marker, gets punished to a little extent to sort of make up for the fact that you're now getting a free suspect marker out of nowhere. This is a great card. Um, there really isn't anything better in this game than your opponents seemingly making a stride to some extent, and saying something like, "Oh, I have scored a card. I have revealed one of your suspect markers and scored a card." And you go, "That's great. I have scored a card also." That feels great. That feels excellent, right? Getting points in. If an enemy model has run forward, they have revealed one of your suspect marker, and your opponent's like, "Yes, I've scored my comb through everything." You go, "That's awesome. So long, it's been a gas. I scored that as well." So that's great. And not only that, not only is it conditional, you know, y- if this was only the first bundle of text, this would still be a good card because more often than not, your enemy is going to try and reveal your suspect markers. Now, they won't always try to reveal your suspect markers. Not every crew will want to reveal one of your suspect markers. So it's really handy that you have this second bundle of text, which is basically gives you control. If you reveal a suspect marker, you get to score it. So this is just an all-round great card. You'll score this very easy. You'll score this all the time. Uh, you know, if if the enemy isn't playing like any suspect markers at all, you might find it hard to score. But really, there's no real crew right now that doesn't need some amount of suspect markers, right? League of Assassin needs some amount of suspect markers. Birds of Prey needs some amount of suspect markers. Soldier of Fortune needs some amount of suspect markers. Everybody needs some amount of suspect markers. There should be plenty for you to score. And then, even if there's not, and typically speaking, if there's not, your opponent's probably playing a little bit poorly and probably not going to win the match anyway. Um, there is a resource for this, which is zero cost. Basically, um, whenever a suspect marker is getting revealed, you can place a gas canister in contact with it first, and then roll a d6 and place a number counter equal to that roll. And any model within 4 inches of the gas canister during its activation basically suffers the poison effect. So this is a way to um, get a lot of poison out there on your opponent, for that say isn't dependent on a model or a miniature like Ace of Spades. This can be really good if there is a suspect marker that has been placed really well. I'm thinking here there has been times where I have moved through a sewer into an enemy deployment zone, placed a suspect marker down and scored, let them in on the joke, right? Place a suspect marker within 4 inches of an enemy model. Then my opponent has moved forward, removed that suspect marker, and I've said, I'm gonna place the longest bin of gas, pop a gas canister down that's within range of the entirety of their crew. Now they have to decide who's gonna get poisoned. That's pretty good. That's kind of like a dream situation. More often than not, I think you'll just simply score this card rather than play it as a resource. But it's just something to bear in mind that at least you can get it out of your hand. If your opponent, doesn't have a lot of suspect blockers, well, you'll probably find it hard to score this as a resource as well. But conditionally, it's good as a resource. But more often than not, it's excellent as an objective card. Um, Poison is fine, but poison isn't good enough in and of itself. Like the poison rule, all poison does is deal a single blood damage at the end of the round if they fail an endurance roll. And then if they have 3+ poison markers on them, then they take 2 damage. So it's really not sort of enough. It doesn't do much outside of just activating cards like seasoning the mix. So you have to get a lot of guys under the spell of taking poison before this is worth it. But good thing about playing cards as a resource is it will eventually come back into your hand, hopefully. So that's the longest been a gas. That's an always card for me. I will always bring that. And then next up, this is the final Joker specific card. We have your Expendable. Your Expendable is a one scorer, and you only bring one copy of this. This is a really good card. Again, this is a one scorer because basically to score this, all you need to do is a friendly model with the Trickster trait is removed as a casualty or becomes KO. Again, remember, the Joker will give all your henchmen with his Chaos Agent trait, he will give all your henchmen the Trickster trait. So basically, what this is saying is if one of your henchmen are killed or removed as a, or knocked out, you get to score 1 point. And additionally, when this happens, both players discard a card from their hand at random. So not bad at all. That's very easy, and discarding is fine. This is a really easy card to score. Now, this is probably one of the few Joker cards that actually the resource is probably a lot better than the objective. This is super easy to score, and you'll sometimes, like 9 times out of 10, when I have this card in my hand, I basically can choose when I want to score it. The question will be whether or not I want to hold on to it to play it for its resource. This is a one resource cost, and basically what it does is if an opponent reveals one of your suspect markers, you can place a friendly model with the trickster trait in contact with that marker before removing it. This will allow you to essentially teleport models across the board to where one of your suspect markers have been revealed. Preferably in base contact with the enemy model, just remove the suspect marker, and preferably that henchman is armed with a chainsaw that deals 3 blood damage. Right? That is yet to activate. And so then you teleport a model across the map, then they activate and they chainsaw through the opponent's miniature. That's kind of like the dream, but it's really not hard to get across. And because this only scores 1 point, you know, it's very tempting to simply wait and use it as a resource instead. So that's just something to bear in mind. But otherwise, this is an excellent card. It does lower your score ceiling a little bit, just because it's not a 2 pointer the way a lot of your other cards are. But nevertheless, it's so easy to score. It's such a gimme, and the resource on it is so powerful. It's definitely worth bringing with every single deck. Again, this is assuming that you're bringing a more traditional Joker crew that consists of a lot of henchmen rather than some sort of strange Harley Quinn leader, free agent style crew list where you don't have access to Chaos Agent for whatever reason. This is an excellent card otherwise. Right, so now we're going to get into the generic cards, and I'm probably going to spend a little bit less time just kind of going into the details of these cards, right? I'm looking at these from the frame of are these good in a Joker deck? Um, because some of them really really are right. Some of them are really good, and probably one of those is call an ambulance. So uh, and I think actually just to frame these neutral decks is these neutral cards is not only are we looking at them from the perspective of are we looking at these as the Joker, but which ones will we choose, right? Because if we've gone through the Joker deck, most of the cards are excellent, right? Most of the Joker cards are really really excellent, and so therefore you will want to bring most of them, right? So, for example, if you're just dropping, this is typical for me. I'm just dropping seasoning in the mix. So that means that I have what 15 cards that I'm bringing. I need 5 more cards, right, from the generic deck. So, Call an Ambulance is a 2 point scorer. It gives you one. You bring one copy of it. It scores during phase four. So this is actually the first phase four I think that we have seen, and it scores instantly. And what it is the score you have to recover at least 2 friendly models from KO during the same recovery phase. Um, so so let's go into that, right? Phase four, you roll in recovery. 2 friendly models have to recover from KO during that phase. This is let's talk about the resource first, actually, before we talk about the objective, because the resource is really the primary reason why you might bring this in a Joker deck. So the resource is a zero coster, and that's really important. Um, Zero cost resource cards are excellent. They are amazing because, again, as I'd spoken about earlier, you will always have a hand of 4 cards. As soon as you have played a card from your hand, you will draw another card. So you will always have 4 cards in your hand. What that means is, if you have a zero cost card, it you can you can play that card out of your hand for nothing. You can have zero resources to spend and play this card just to cycle it out of your hand. If you have no one that is KO during the recovery phase and you don't think that you're going to be able to score Call an Ambulance, you can simply play this for zero cost resources and get it out of your hand and draw another card that hopefully you will be able to score, right? So that ups the value of this card significantly. Now, the resource, what it does is you place a medical supplies marker in contact with one of your friendly suspect markers, and then a friendly model in contact with this marker during its activation may manipulate it to remove up to 3 damage markers of either stun or blood and an effect, or make one friendly model within 4 inches of the marker recover from KO. And then you remove the medical supplies marker. That is really nice, right? Because if you have a knocked out model, uh, 9 times out of 10, right? If they are a henchman with 5 endurance and 4 willpower, they're probably not getting back up unless you roll really really low. So having the ability to simply make a manipulate action and pick them up is really nice. Um, so it's good for that reason. Plus, if no one's knocked out, you can just throw one out there on one of your friendly suspect markers, and then hope maybe later on it remains on the board right until it's used by you. So it's not bad at all. I've seen this get up, like Joker, right? I've seen this get bosses up from being KO'd and be able to activate that round where they otherwise wouldn't have been able to activate. So for that reason, it's good. It's definitely a potential pick. I think this is very much a taste maker type of card. I don't think this is like a definite 100% always card. This is a card that you just might get some utility out of. It's one that you should try. It's one that you should put into your deck and see. Now, in terms of scoring it as an objective, recovering at least 2 friendly models from KO isn't super difficult in a Joker crew just because you have so many henchmen. Um, a lot of them are probably going to be knocked out, to be perfectly frank, right? A lot of them, they get knocked out very easily. And if you're up against, say, a very stun heavy crew like Batman, you're probably going to have quite a few dudes who are completely knocked out. So it's possible. I've scored this plenty of times. It's not unlikely. But a way to think about this card is really that if you score it, that's just upside, but it's a nice little resource coster. Probably one of the better resource. There's a few that are like this, that we'll go into in a second. Um, that basically allow you to place a supplies marker of some capacity down, and this is probably the best one. Okay, and then next we're going to go into catch a bullet. So this one is a 1 point scorer. You bring 1 copy of this, and it is played in phase 3. It's an instant score, and basically to score it, you need to inflict at least 6 damage of any type with a single ranged attack. So you can see here, this is obviously something that you want to do anyway. You want to inflict lots of damage with ranged attacks. So it only scores you 1 point, which is pretty weak. You really don't want a 1 pointer in your Joker deck just because you already have such a hard time reaching the sort of higher levels of other decks, right? If other decks are scoring 3 pointers, you really don't want to be scoring a 1 pointer. The reason why you're bringing your Expendables because it's so easy to score and it's got an amazing resource. Now, Catch a Bullet does have a good resource as well. Place an ammo crate in contact with one of your suspect markers, and a friendly model may uh, activate it to basically restore 1 magazine. Um, that's good. That's not awful, but I would caution you because I think that on the face of it, this seems really good, especially if you've got like a model like Rastaklan who has like 2 ammo and a really nice gun. I think it's very tempting to think, yeah, this is excellent. But I would caution that, typically speaking, just always remember there's only 4 rounds in this game, which means that you only can really maximize, can only get at most 4 shots off. Anyway, right? Only 4 ammo counters can be spent. Secondly, you tend not to be able to shoot every round well anyway. You know, you might be able to make a punt here or there, but usually during round 1, you're typically moving. So 2 ammo, I find, tends to be really good. If you're getting a third shot off with someone like Rasta Clown, really your opponent's played poorly there, right? Um, so this is okay. It's not great. I think a 1 pointer is pretty rough. So I just tend not to bring this. Your henchmen, your henchmen with lots of that would you get use out of this tend to go down too easily. To really be sustained through this. And then your free agents or bosses like Joker, who have really nice guns, they tend to have enough ammo to do them anyway. So I just don't see enough utility in this to bring this in a Joker crew. I think maybe there's other crews that I'd be tempted to bring it in, but I don't think Joker really is one of them. Though it's definitely a your mileage may vary. If you bring a very gun heavy crew, you might find some use for it. Or if you bring someone like Chuckles, who has one ammo, I think this card maybe is really good for Chuckles. But apart from that, otherwise, probably not worth it. Okay, next up there is Confusion. This is a 2 point scorer. You score it in PS3, and it is an instant score, and it's reveal one enemy suspect marker within 8 inches of an enemy deployment zone. Um, this card confuses me, um, funnily enough, because this card is really dependent on deployment zones. And there's a few other cards in the generic deck that are really dependent on deployment zones as well. And FYI, the reason why you can tell it's a generic card is because there's no haha up in the corner, right? So it's another generic card. Um, look, deployment is randomly drawn, and there are only a few deployments where this is very easy to achieve. Um, now, the map itself, it's a 3 by 3 map for Batman, so it's not a huge map. You can typically get about halfway across the field within rounds one, rounds two, right? You're making your way halfway across. So this is definitely achievable, but there's a lot that needs to happen. Your enemy needs to place suspect markers within 8 inches of their deployment zone. You need to be able to get within the enemy deployment zone. It's too much going on, to be honest, for a 2 pointer. It's too conditional on your opponent playing, certainly, in a certain way. It's too conditional on the deployment zones being easy to access. There are some deployments where this will be really easy to score, and there will be some deployments where this is impossible to score. So I would be really cautious if I bring in this card. The two resource cost is during a friendly model's activation, you can move another friendly model up to 3 inches. That's good. That's not amazing. It's not poor. Um, it's certainly not two resources good, I think. So I don't think this card does enough. This is a no from me. Um, yeah, no thanks. I just wouldn't really bring this in a Joker crew. I don't see any real use in it, to be perfectly frank. Um, okay, next up we have Die Hard. This is played during phase one, and it scores at the end of the round that it's played in. What you do is you choose one of your models, anyone except for your boss, and if that model is not KO or removed as a casualty, you score this objective. Um, well, to go over the resource here as well, because I never really play this for the resource. This is a zero cost resource card. Basically, you place a Wayne Tech marker in contact with one of your suspect markers, and then a friendly model in contact may manipulate it to activate it. And if they do so, no model within 4 inches of the Wayne Tech marker may perform, be targeted by, or benefit from an active trait. And then the Wayne Tech marker is removed at the end of the round. So that's a bit weird, but it speaks to the fact that I've never seen a Wayne Tech marker be played in a game ever. Um, Yet I have seen Die Hard be played in almost every single game I'm in. This is an excellent card, by the way. It's usually played in every single game I'm in because I play it. This is a brilliant card. This is really easy to score. You will more often than not have one model that you reckon during the game will probably not be hurt, especially as a Joker crew, right? As a Joker crew, you should have loads of henchmen. They should be all over the place doing, throwing down suspect markers all around. And your opponent will have to decide if they want to go out of their way to knock out your model that you've played your Die Hard on, your Thug One who's off on the other side of the map, or if they want to continue scoring their own cards or hurting your models that are actually relevant to the game, if they want to hit your Harley Quinn or your Joker. So this card is excellent. I will tend to score this more often than not because your opponent will often simply concede the 2 points. Now, again, it does take your opponent to concede it. There is counterplay available to your opponent. Your opponent can simply knock out the model that you choose. So you will have to just think a little bit before deciding which model you're going to choose. Um, but it allows you to be a little bit tricksy, right? You can throw this out on models. If your opponent has an opportunity to either knock out your boss or a henchman, and you really don't want your boss, you really don't want Joker to be knocked out, you can throw this out on the henchman beside the Joker and say, choose. Choose. Do you want to give me 2 points or not? And this will throw them for a loop sometimes. So this is an excellent card. This is actually whenever if I'm bringing everything, if I'm bringing the poison package, this is one of the cards that I will bring anyway, right? This will make up the one of the three from the 17 cards that I can't bring, or that I have to bring from the generic deck. Otherwise, if I'm bringing the 15 cards, just the sort of everything except for seasoning the mix from the Joker crew deck, I'm bringing Die Hard, no questions asked. This is an excellent card. Okay. The next up there is Dirty Job. We've already looked at this at the very beginning, but basically this is a scored on phase three. It's an instant score, and it's make an enemy model KO or a casualty. So really very easy to score in a sense, right? Because this is something that you want to do anyway. And then as a one resource, it's a friendly model adds one die to a melee attack, and then that model suffers one blood damage. So you get to it's basically, so in this game you can effort, you take a stun damage, and then you get to add a die to your attack. Um, this is basically that equivalent, except that it's one blood damage. So it's sort of like an effort that you can do on top of efforting, get the added die. That's pretty good. Actually, I mean, that's really nice. Um, Adding an extra die is always really super good. Try and guarantee a damage on, but whether or not it's worth bringing a set of cards that are only going to score you one at most, I don't think it's worth it. Um, Maybe for fun, I bring this just to add in. I think that there's definitely some utility to use it as a resource card mostly, and not really score it as an objective. But I just don't think it does enough. I don't think it adds enough potential points into your objective pool in order to justify bringing three of these cards. So I wouldn't bring them personally, but I could see an argument to bring them. I just don't think they're really worth it. Okay, now we have Disturbance. This is a two scorer, and you bring three of these. This is played in phase three, and it's an instant scorer. And essentially, to score this, you have to reveal an enemy suspect marker, and after having revealed that, you must have more suspect markers than your opponent to score. And then, as a resource, you can instead play this during a friendly activation to target a zero marker, and that marker cannot be used this round. This card is excellent. This isn't the contender for you know, one of the bundle of generic cards that I will bring in every Joker uh, deck, basically. Whenever I'm assembling my crew deck, if only because, right, there is a certain rhythm to this card. This card is really easy to score because you have, or should have, in a typical Joker deck, you should have more models than your opponent, right? Joker crews excel in consisting of lots of cheap henchmen, so you should have more models. So you should have more henchmen within inspire range of Joker, which means you should be able to make more manipulate actions than your opponent, which means you should have more suspect markers, generally speaking, than your opponent, at least during the first few rounds. So if you have moved all of your guys out and played suspect markers, you could have up to your maximum limit in round one. Um, So if you're removing a suspect marker of your opponent and then counting the suspect markers, you should score this when needed. So round two, round three, this should be easy enough to score. Maybe by round four, it might be starting to get a little bit hard, right? Because some of your suspect markers are exploding. Some of your suspect markers, are just disappearing because of the fact that they do tend to explode. Um, but this is definitely one that's possible to score. Now, there is another card that fulfills a similar function to this that I will tend to bring over Disturbance, but Disturbance definitely has a strong argument if you're ever bringing it, especially when you consider that it has a resource counter that for zero resource allows you to prevent a serum marker from being interacted with or used. That is excellent. Um, Serum markers are really good for the Joker crew in the sense that the Joker crew tends to have very limited mobility outside of certain models. So Harley Quinn is really mobile. Bud and Lou, the hyena, are really mobile. The bikers are super mobile, but aside from that, most of your guys will have 8 inches of movement, which is very slow compared to some other crews. Which means that you're going to need to use the sewer markers to move around a lot. Now that goes for your opponent as well. Your opponent will want to use sewer markers to move around a lot too. So, you can basically utilize the seer markers to say move your models, up to the top of rooftops, and then play this card to prevent your enemy from following you up there. So this is really good. This card actually really hurts the Joker crew in a sense because if your opponent is bringing this card, their ability to prevent you from using zero markers really hurts. So this card, in theory, hurts the Joker crew more than it helps, just because other crews have access to it. But it's really good. Again, it's a zero resource, so it'd be really easy to play, really easy to cycle out of your hand. If you, for whatever reason, don't have enough suspect markers to score this card, simply play it as a resource. Choose a sewer that you don't plan on using. Simply stop others from using it, and then get it out of your hand. Find a card that you can score. Get a new card. So excellent card. Won't bring this always, just because there's a better card I think that can take up the three slots that you're sort of looking to fill. That better card is not the next one that we've come to, which is flanking. This is a phase four scoring card. It scores instantly, and basically to score it, you remove a suspect marker within 4 inches of a table corner. And what that means is this is not a reveal action. Your model isn't revealing a suspect marker. Instead, what you're doing is at phase four, you're just simply picking up. You don't have to have a model in contact with it or anything. You, as a player, are just picking up the suspect marker and removing it from a table corner. So there has to be a suspect marker within 4 inches of a table corner that you can then pick up and remove. And that can be a friendly or an enemy. And it will score you 2 points if you can do so. You get 3 copies of it. The resource is okay. It's one resource. It costs, and you can play it as a resource to get a friendly model, gains one defense die when defending against a melee attack. That's pretty good. Nice defensive card. In terms of the objective nature of it, it's pretty tough. I have played with this card a lot because I really like this card in theory. Like I like what this card is trying to achieve. I think that if there's any crew that can get flanking to work, it is a crew that is very mobile and can immediately begin playing suspect markers very early on in the round, or it is a crew with a lot of models that can afford to have one model dedicated to simply throwing out a suspect marker every round in a corner that you can then pick up in phase four to score. So Joker obviously fits that second one, right? So in theory, I think that this could work. The problem is that basically you're too slow. Um, I think that Thug 1 is probably your best candidate to try and move across the board to begin playing suspect markers out in the corner of the game board to begin removing and scoring flanking. The problem is it's not worth 2 points. It's not worth moving, putting all this effort in to score a card that ostensibly scores for the same as really some other cards that we're going to talk about, that are easier. There's a bundle of 3 cards that we're going to go into that is just so much easier than flanking the score. The resource aspect is nice, but I just think that this card doesn't do enough. It's too difficult to score for the Joker. I just wouldn't bring this. I've tried to make it work. I haven't been able to make it work. It's been very sad. Yeah. And there's some deployments as well. There's a deployment where you deploy on the quarters, and that really hurts your ability to score this because half the quarters, therefore, you can't score uh, cards. You can't place suspect markers down in your own deployment zone. So whenever you're deploying on 2 of the corners, it hurts. It really does hurt because you've now halved the amount of positions that you can score this card. There's some deployments where it does work. I'm thinking the line, for example, where this kind of works, but otherwise, no. It just it's not functional, unfortunately. So I wouldn't bring this. Okay, and now we have I'm feeling weird. So I'd spoken earlier about seasoning the mix. And seasoning the mix, you're rewarded for poisoning people and then killing them, right? I'm feeling weird is a 2 scorer that you only bring one copy of, and it scores on phase three. It's an instant score, and all you need to do is inflict an effect on an enemy model. So the reason why this works really well with seasoning the mix is that a poison is an effect. So if you inflict the poison effect on an enemy, then you just have scored this card. So to be honest, in a lot of ways, this is far easier to score than seasoning the mix. So if you are bringing the poison package, if you're bringing Ace of Spades, I would take this card before I brought seasoning the mix, and I would still bring seasoning the mix. But this is just a very easy card to score if you are bringing effects. Conversely, if you aren't bringing effects, if you aren't bringing poison, this can be a bit harder to score. Um, what constitutes an effect? You know, um, being killed does not constitute an effect. Being knocked out does not constitute an effect. So if you have some way of applying terror or applying poison, then definitely yes. But otherwise, this might be a little bit harder to score. I think that a card like Die Hard is probably better to bring, just because it adds more to your deck than this does. The resource component of this is one resource cost and allows you to remove an effect from a friendly model. To be frank, no model in the Joker crew, outside of maybe Joker himself and potentially Harley Quinn, is worth spending a resource on to remove an effect from. That sounds cruel, but most Joker uh, crew members are henchmen that are pretty lowly, except Rastacline, right? Rastacline, I would I would look after Rastacline. I would try to remove an effect from Rastacline. I like Rastacline, but otherwise, most models, don't worry about them. Um, if they're affected by something, just embrace it. They don't they don't matter enough to really worry about them too much. So score the card if you can. So yeah, this is a conditional card. This is the card that I bring. If I'm bringing poisons, if I'm bringing Ace of Spades, I take this and seasoning in the mix, and I go excellent. I just need to find two more cards to bring with me. Okay, next up we have Overdrive. This is a fine card. It's two. It scores for two victory points, I should say, and it is a scored in phase three, and it's an instant. And basically, it scores when an enemy model makes an effort to defend itself against your model's attack. You don't declare an effort on your model. So basically, you go to attack somebody, you ask them, are they going to make an effort to defend? They say yes. Then you decide you're not going to declare an effort then to attack. You say, I'm not going to. So it's easy to score if if your opponent often efforts. Some people I've played against, I find, just don't really effort defense. They just kind of take the dice as they may. Um, but more often than not, you will find people do effort defense to protect certain types of models. Now, that's kind of a problem for the Joker because the Joker's henchmen tend to be pretty weenie, which means that you usually want to maximize their impact on the board state as much as you can, right? So your guys come in with four health, 5 health, they're going down to a straight bullet, right? As soon as somebody looks at them, they're going down. So you really want to, if they get to make an attack, you want that attack to matter, right? So I typically find that I'm incentivized to effort as much as possible with my henchmen, unless unless I'm going into a crew that has a lot of stun damage, like Batman, a crew that likes to punch a lot and deal a lot of stun damage. I usually want to effort as much as possible at attacks. So Overdrive unfortunately prevents me from kind of playing into that. Now that is really a mileage may vary sort of situation. You might find that you just are a little bit more leery about efforting. That's fine. In that case, then Overdrive might be a card to think about taking. Um, I just like to maximize the low lifespan of henchmen. If you're bringing free agents, heavy deck, or if you're bringing specifically some tough models with you in your Joker crew, then yeah, Overdrive does function, and Overdrive is good in that case, because you know you can see Bean's face on the model. But funnily enough, Bean's face on this card, with Venom, you're actually incentivized to effort because you get free efforts. So if you have Venom, you tend not to want to actually play this card. But in any case, the resource cost of this card is 0, so that's excellent again. Again, another thing to think about that maybe you do want to bring in, right? Just to cycle through your hand a lot easier. And what it does is it allows you to place a venom container in contact with one of your suspect markers, and a friendly model may remove the venom container to gain a venom dose, and it doesn't cost an action, so it's basically a free venom dose you can kind of throw out there, which is pretty good. Venom is nice. Venom gives you a free effort, so that's pretty good. Yeah, it's fine. It's really not Venom Dose isn't something that I get too excited about. It's not something that I would, really go crazy about. Not as a Joker player. Not in a Joker crew. If I'm playing Bane, I probably am a little bit more excited about it. But with Joker, no, I wouldn't really take this card often enough. But again, that's a playstyle thing. I think that there's definitely some people will always bring Overdrive. Just because you know it it rewards you for attacking opponents. You just have to take a little bit of a hit to your attack that you're making. Okay. Next up, we have Stake Your Claim, which is a 1 pointer that you get, 1 victory point, and you'll take 3 copies of this if you decide to take it. It scores on phase 3, and it's an instant score. And what you have to do is place a suspect marker within an enemy deployment zone. Um, And then its resource is a 0 resource cost, and it says target a friendly suspect marker. A model that reveals that marker this round suffers the enervating 2 effect. This is very variable. Again, it's very similar to the previous one that we had discussed, confusion, right? In that this is easy to score on some deployments, but otherwise it's very hard to score. In most other deployments, and this is sort of you will find that sometimes you do get into the enemy deployment zone. There are some other cards in the game that incentivize this. So I'm not thinking about Joker here. I'm thinking about someone like Two-Face. There is a card that he has called the Gamble that rewards him for moving models into the enemy deployment zone. Or there's the Birds of Prey card, the Nest, that rewards the Birds of Prey for moving models into the enemy deployment zone. Uh, These cards, typically speaking, that tend to want you to get into the deployment zone in crew decks tend to reward you 3 points, right? Because I think night models realize that it's actually quite hard to get into an enemy deployment zone and stay there. It requires a lot of actions. You've got to move. Usually, you've got to take a lot of movement actions that tend to not be conducive to winning the game, right? They tend not to bring you into base contact with an enemy. Usually, your opponent's moving out of their own deployment zone. So you're really moving somewhere random to and score points. So scoring 1 victory point off the base of moving into an enemy deployment zone, which is hard to do. You're not going to be able to do it in round 1. Probably not going to be able to do it in round 2. Yeah, it's just not really worth it. A 0 resource cost almost saves this, but there's just so many other cards to choose from. I've never brought this. I've never even contemplated bringing this card. I've never seen anyone play this card. This just overall isn't a very good card. It scores too little for too much work, basically. And in terms of the resource, uh, if your enemy opponent wants to reveal one of your suspect markers because it's going to achieve them some sort of card, they're going to do it whether or not they suffer the enervating 2 effect. And the enervating 2 effect isn't enough to justify bringing a 1 point scorer for such a hard, onerous task. So, yeah, no, just it's a hard pass for me. Okay, and now we have stick to the plan. Okay, so this is a 2 point scorer. You take 3 of these, and it scores in phase 4. It's an instant scorer. To score it, you must have more suspect markers than your opponent in play. So when I was talking about the Disturbance card, this is the card I was thinking of when I was referring to. There's a better version of Disturbance, in my opinion, and in my opinion, it is stick to the plan. The reason why this is better in a Joker crew specifically, I think the Disturbance is better in other crews like Batman, but I think Stick to the Plan is better for Joker specifically because they're very how to put this, very very forward heavy in their suspect markers. That is to say, you start the game with maybe say 11 puny weak henchmen, right? And they run out of your deployment zone. This is always my first. This is my opening gambit with Joker, right? Is they all go running out of my deployment zone and they throw down suspect markers. They're throwing down Joker teeth. They're throwing down fish. You know, they're trying to blow themselves up. They're throwing down suspect markers. You can have up to around 8 suspect markers out by the end of round one. That is going to score you more often than not stick to the plan in phase four. So if you have this in your opening hand, you can probably score this in round one. You can probably score this in round two. By round three and round four, your suspect markers are probably beginning to blow themselves up, so you're finding it harder to score. But this card is just excellent. It's really easy to score in the opening rounds, especially if you go for a wider sort of Joker build. The resource is one cost. It allows you to choose a friendly henchman within 4 inches of one of your suspect markers. You can remove that marker to give the henchman +4 basic move distance until the end of the round. That's okay. It's not excellent. To be honest, it's probably not as good as Disturbance. I think Disturbance, with its zero resource, is just really good for cycling. It's really good to just deny certain certain serum markers, and you'll always be able to use it as a resource even if you're losing in the suspect marker game. Stick to the plan has the tendency to actually bung up your hand a little bit more, to sort of be difficult to get out of it, because you won't always be, within 4 inches of a suspect marker. um, you won't always have a henchman rather within 4 inches of one of your suspect markers. So this might be a bit harder to score in terms of a resource, but the ease by which it's scored as an objective, I think, makes up for that. This is one where I think it's definitely very much a flavor thing. This is something that you will have to decide on. I think play with this, play with Disturbance, see for yourself which one you think works better. I think that on the face of it, stick to the plan does work better just because it's easier to score in the opening rounds. So this will be more often than not. This will be one of the cards that I will bring, or one of the bundles of cards that I will bring with me in a Joker crew. This is basically, if I'm not bringing the poison package, this is replacing the seasoning the mix and I'm feeling weird effect. That tends to be how it looks. Okay, and next they must know pain. Okay, so this is a one scorer, and you take one version of this, and it is basically the melee equivalent of Dirty Job, or no, rather, it's the melee equivalent of, where is it? Catch a Bullet. So you have to inflict at least 6 damage with a single melee attack. Nice and simple, nice and easy. Definitely something to bring in other crews. Maybe not so much the Joker. It can be hard to score with the Joker. You just don't have the same capacity, the same types of crazy damage dealing models that other crews can bring. Um, you can see a Talon here, stabbing Batman in the back. But funnily enough, usually if I'm bringing Batman, this is something that I might think about because Batman has the capacity to deal 6 damage very easily. Joker, not so much. Joker finds it harder. So just not really a card that I think plays well into the Joker crew type. Usually as a Joker player, you're just not really interested in dealing damage anyway. You're interested in throwing down Joker teeth and Joker fish and getting in the way of people and throwing down suspect markers at their feet, right? Like dealing melee damage is just sort of gravy. I don't find it really worth it. Its resource cost is a friendly model can remove up to 2 damage markers during its activation, or choose a KO friendly model within 4 inches to automatically recover from KO. So the resource itself is really good. That's really nice, right? Like being able to remove 2 damage markers is really nice. Or to pick somebody up. It's very similar to Call an Ambulance. The difference between this and Call an Ambulance is that Call an Ambulance scores you 2 points. This scores you 1 point, and that is enough, I think, to swing Call an Ambulance. This one, unfortunately, just the 1 pointer just isn't good enough. Also, it doesn't cost 0; it costs 1, and it's surprisingly difficult to score as well. Sometimes you'll find that dealing 6 damage in one attack is kind of hard, especially with efforts throwing around. Right? It's definitely easier to score the ranged attack one than the melee attack one as a Joker player. With the Joker crew. And then finally, we come to the last card, which is valuable commodities. And this is probably the best for last. I bring this all the time in my Joker deck. This is a 3 scorer, and that's the reason why. Basically, it helps pull up the ceiling, push that up a little bit, raise the ceiling a bit for the Joker crew, help you get a little bit more points, maximize the points potential. And this is scored in, well, it's played rather in phase three, and it's scored when the condition is met. And what you have to do is essentially you reveal one of your suspect markers and you replace that with a loot marker that goes on to the, character's card, whatever character you use to reveal a suspect marker. Um, the loot marker then goes onto their card. You remove the suspect marker. And essentially that model holds on to this loot. And if by the end of the game they are not knocked out or removed as a casualty and they're still holding on to the loot, then you score the card. So this goes into play until the end of the game. Now, if they are knocked out or removed as a casualty, the loot marker falls onto the ground at their feet, and the opponent or one of your own models can then pick up the loot marker. Essentially, if you end with the loot marker in on your side with one of your models holding it, you score it. If your enemy picks it up, then they don't get to score it, but they prevent you from scoring it. If it's just lying on the ground, then you don't get to score it. Importantly, this can't be played after the third round. So if you draw this in round four, this is a dead draw, which is really poor because the resource is two resource points. It costs you two resources, and all it does is discards your plot card, and any objective cards behind the plot card is discarded too. So if you're not playing with plots, this is useless, right? The resource component is absolutely useless and you won't be able to get this out of your hand. Round four comes around, you pick this up, not great. This can often be a dead hand in that. However, the fact is, if you pick it up at any time other than round four, this is an excellent card, and it's a really rare opportunity to score three points. So this is almost mandatory, I think, to help you raise the score ceiling. This is an excellent card. It's very thematic as well. I tend to bring this on most of my villain crews just because it's really fun. You just get to pick up a loot and try and get away with it. So it's just very good. I think it's very competitive as well. And if you are playing with plots, it's actually okay. The resource is okay with plots because when you're playing with plots, there's the tendency to get cards stuck behind the plot card. This basically counters that and helps that not happen. So this is one of those ones I'll bring. And to be honest, right, that's basically it, right? Like that's the generic cards from the Joker perspective and the Joker cards. So what I'll do is whenever I'm kind of creating a deck, right? Whenever I'm going forward and setting up a deck, the first thing I'll do is I will bring Showtime and I will bring Jokerometer just straight up, because there are three scorers, um, and I need to try and score 3 points. There's just so many points. Can really help swing a game. Sometimes a game can hinge on 1 point, so I'll always bring those. Even if I think Jokerometer won't score, I'll still bring it. Next up, I will assess whether or not I have easy access to poisons. If I do, I'll bring seasoning in the mix, and I'm feeling weird. If I don't, I will not bring those cards. Then I will pick up Bite the Dust. It doesn't look fresh. Let them do their thing. Let them in on the joke. So long as been a gas and you're expendable. Then I'll look at my list. If I have Joker, Harley Quinn, and a free agent, I will bring Let's Dance. If my list consists of Joker, Harley Quinn, and nothing but henchmen, I will not bring Let's Dance. I'll usually just leave that behind. So let's do that, okay? So I bring in the Joker card, I bring in the Harley Quinn card, and you'll notice there it hasn't counted towards my maximum deck size. I'm going to bring Bite the Dust. I'm going to bring It Doesn't Look Fresh. So you'll see that's six. Let them do their thing. Usually one of those, that's up to 7. I'll bring Let Them In on the Joke. I'll bring So Long As Been a Gas, and You're Expendable. Those are like the default cards. Those are the cards I will always bring, right? So I always have 14 cards basically when I'm thinking about a Joker deck. I'm only bringing Joker and Harley, so I'm not going to bring Let's Dance, say. And I don't have any way of applying poison. I haven't brought Ace of Spades, so I'm not bringing Season in the mix. Now I'm going to basically just have a think about what I want. So I'll tend to say, look, Die Hard is really easy to score. I probably will score it, so I'm going to bring it just because it is that easy to score. Next up, I want valuable commodities because it will score me 3 points if I'm lucky enough. And by lucky, I mean if I draw within rounds 1 to 3, which is super likely, especially because I tend to be trying to score as many cards as possible, which means I get through my hand very, very quickly, or get through my deck very, very quickly. I'm going to bring valuable commodities. And then I've got 16 out of 20. I will tend to bring stick to the plan. And then from here, it's basically sort of, your own choice what you want to bring. I, at this stage, usually bring call an ambulance just because it's, you know, likely that I'll probably want to pick up a model or that I can recover two friendly models. Otherwise, I do think that Let's Dance is definitely a very, very viable card. I think that it is super valuable over a call an ambulance. So it's really just a flavor thing. Um, Let's Dance, I just do find it hard to score when I only have Joker and Harley Quinn. But really, at this stage, I mean, you can't really go wrong if you choose between Let's Dance, Call an Ambulance, or even Overdrive. Catch a Bullet, They Must Know Pain, Confusion, and I'm Feeling Weird really aren't that great, in my opinion. Um, I guess I'm Feeling Weird is sort of up there as well. Maybe, think about putting that slot in these four in, one of these. But in this case, let's bring Call an Ambulance. That's typically what I would bring. And then there's your deck, right? And you'll find this deck, I think, a lot of fun, pretty easy to score. Um, just remember that with the Joker, you should have a lot of henchmen, and Inspire gives you a free manipulate action. So there is no excuse not to be throwing out Joker Teeth. There's no excuse not to be throwing out Joker Fish, and there's no excuse not to be throwing out any suspect marker within 4 inches of an enemy model. Um, I'm just not worrying about it, right? I mean, the deck, to a large extent, and I don't want to be reductive here, but the deck does kind of play itself. If you have Bite the Dust in your hand, just throw it out there. Don't worry about taking damage. Just don't worry about it. And remember that it scores. Whoops. It scores when the teeth are revealed, just as a little added bonus, which means that if you're being tricksy, you can always just reveal the suspect marker and score it on instantly. I find that a little bit unsporting though. Um, So yeah, I mean that's the Joker deck. That is the generic deck with the Joker deck. It's a really fun playstyle. It really slots and synergizes well with the miniatures that are available to Joker. It really does incentivize a wide sort of Joker crew with lots of henchmen making lots of manipulate actions. And there's a lot of discard as well in there that will sort of disrupt your opponent's plans and will kind of disrupt your own plans, let's be honest, as well. But, it's just all part and parcel of the thing. And, you know, I think just really important to remember is that you don't win this game by killing enemy models. You win this game by scoring cards. Just when you're playing the game, just always remember that. Okay, you are not going to win the game by killing your opponent. You will win it by scoring your cards. And 9 times out of 10, it is better to score a card than it is to remove an enemy model. If you're going to remove an enemy model over scoring a card, really think deeply and hard about that. Just really, really consider it. It's one of the biggest things to get over, I think, because a lot of people just play the game as a sort of deathmatch game. It's not. You're trying to score your objectives. Um, that isn't to say that there aren't crews out there that really do reward you for killing. But they just do so in specific ways, and we'll get to those. But the Joker isn't really one of them. The Joker, he has his own schemes. To be honest, you're rewarded more for injuring your own guys. So yeah, that's the Joker deck. If you have any questions at all, if you disagree with me with my assessment, or if you agree with me and want to reaffirm my and validate my beliefs, please do leave a comment below. Um, if you like the video, please do like it. If you think that actually this sort of more informal style is better than the more scripted versions that I've been doing in the past, do let me know as well. This was a lot easier to film um, than the Spotlight on Gotham video was. So do let me know. And if you do have any particular crews that you would like me to go over next, do let me know because my current intentions are to sort of think about the Batman crew Next, just because it is one of the starter ones, I think it's one of the more popular crews, but I'm definitely open to what other people are interested in. And I yeah, so please do like and subscribe if you do like the content. If you do want to see more Batman content, please let me know. And yeah, so hit me up on the comments below. So thanks everyone. It's been a real pleasure, and I shall see you next time.